Welcome to Of Sound Mind and Spirit. I'm Shelley.
And I'm Lisa. We're sisters walking together on a journey of faith. We're not perfect.
We definitely don't have all the answers.
We're inviting you to walk with us as we explore ways we can better know and grow in our faith together.
Welcome back to another episode from Of Sound Mind and Spirit. Hello, Lisa.
Hey, Shelley.
So how was your weekend?
That was fine.
So we had baseball again on Sunday. And, that always makes it tricky to go to Mass. We were scouting around for another place to go, just in case we didn't make it back in time to go at our regular parish.
Okay. And did you find somewhere to go? Or did you make it back?
They lost the game, so we made it back in time. But yeah, I was looking around for one out in the area where we were. They only had one Mass time. But I was kind of looking forward to getting to go there, to that other church, because, there's a lot of fun kind of benefits of getting to attend Mass at a different parish.
Yeah, I like when we're traveling or have the opportunity to go to other churches, other parishes, to check it out and see how it's different and the same all at the same time.
I like that you kind of get out of your comfort zone. I mean, sometimes going to Mass at the same parish, and I know it's our home and we have our community there, but sometimes it's, nice to shake it up a little bit, get to see how other people do certain things.
Well, and what people who aren't Catholic might not realize is that every Catholic church in the entire world on the same Sunday has the same readings. So we read the same Old Testament, New Testament gospel readings, the same psalm, and the structure of the Mass is, very, very, very similar, right? But there's still ways that each parish has a nuance or a personality to it that can greatly affect how you experience the Mass. And that's kind of what we're talking about, that sometimes it really, I don't know, I say it's cool. It's kind of cool to see how other churches are doing it.
Right. It's a great example of that lowercase c Catholic, which means universal. And I really love that our faith has that structure in how we worship and how we celebrate the liturgies. Because like you said, anywhere we go, no matter what the language, it's the same presentation. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. The same readings, the same prayers, all of that. And yeah, you said language. Yeah, I've been to Mass a few times in different languages, none of which I speak very well. So it's always kind of fun to not truly understand the language of what's going on and still know what's going on. I think that's kind of fun.
So today I thought maybe you and I could sit and chat about the many benefits of attending Mass at different parishes. What's the good that we get from going to these other churches outside of our own neighborhood community? I mean,
that sounds good.
So the first one that I came up with was you kind of get the opportunity to meet new people and experience how they welcome you to their church.
That's true. I remember one that I went to in Alabama while I was on a road trip, and there was this older man outside welcoming everybody. He had an Irish accent, very pleasant. And then, don't you know, we go in and he's the priest.
Oh,
but he was standing outside before Mass, not in a collar, not just wearing normal street clothes, welcoming everybody and greeting people. And then 10 minutes later, he's processing up the aisle to celebrate Mass. And so that it kind of, I'd not seen that before. So that was kind of cool.
We've had both the good and the bad of the welcoming experience. I'll go with the good. We were traveling and we went to Queen of Heaven in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And we didn't really know what to expect at this parish. Came in, the Knights of Columbus were the greeters and the ushers, and they knew right away that we were not regular parishioners. And so they welcomed us. They asked where we were from, why we were in town, made sure that we had a good seat, is what they called it. And then my husband took our younger son then to go up to use the restroom before Mass started. And the Knights of Columbus gentleman asked my husband, hey, we know you're a guest. Would you be willing to serve with us during the collection? And they didn't have the kind where they passed the baskets. They had the kind with the basket on the end of a long pole, which I don't think I've ever been to a church with that. And he said yes. And so he didn't tell me.
Oh,
And
that's funny.
when we got to that part in the mass, he stood up and left. And I'm like, where's he going? And then next thing I know, he's coming down the aisle with this gentleman, and he's doing the pole on one side and the guy's doing the pole on the other side. But I mean, not just made us feel welcome to their parish, but invited us to participate in service. And he had no way of knowing that that was only 2 months after Brian had entered the church. So he was completely on fire. And the same guy gave us a tour after mass of the parish, and it was just lovely.
That's cool. That's cool. I don't think I've ever been recognized as, oh, you're not a parishioner. That I mean, I guess I don't could have not been at one small enough before, but that's kind of a neat that they noticed.
I don't know that I would recognize non-parishioners at our parish. I do stand and greet as often as I can.
Yeah, some of our favorites that we've attended have been the older gentlemen that are outside, always very, very friendly. Good morning, welcome. How are you today? And I love that. It just puts you in the right frame of mind to walk into the building. And I always like that real big greeting when you come in.
Mm-hmm. So another thing I noticed going to all these different churches, usually for baseball, it's all the different art and architecture. I mean, we grew up in what do you call the type of architecture we grew up in? We were at one of those 70s churches, the 1970s. So it's kind of like a half circle, but we didn't grow up going to like the old traditional style church, what I'll call the pre-Vatican II style church. So it's been fun for me getting to go to different churches, and I can almost always guess the age of the church based on the way it's set up.
You're forgetting the one that we attended in Tulsa when we lived there, because it was multi-levels. There were stairs, the altar and everything was down low, and you sat up higher, and it was like a auditorium seating in that way.
I do not remember that church at all, but I only lived there for one summer. So you have to forgive me for not knowing that one.
Yeah, but I do. That is one of the things that I really like, is to see, kind of what the church highlights art-wise, the stained glass, what stories, what saints, do they have statues? Do they have, what do their stations of the cross look like? Some of it, I mean, is amazing. And it could be an old church, it could be a new church. I mean, it doesn't matter, but some of it's amazing. And then there's a few that you're like, huh, like, that's an odd choice,
I've got one for you. A couple Easters ago, we celebrated up in, where were we? We were in Allen, Texas, and we were celebrating at one of these great big huge churches they have up there. And their stations of the cross were scenes from the movie The Passion of the Christ. I kid you not. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. It worked, but it was very odd to me. And that was the first church I'd ever been into that had the great big huge screens up on either side of the altar where they put all the words up there.
I don't think I've ever been to a Catholic church with screens. So that I haven't had that experience. No. Mm-mm.
Well, they are coming.
Wow. Yeah. I do. One of the things I love when you go into a church that has all the stained glass is just get there early and sit and look.
Yes.
And then just look at everything. And I love that. Sometimes I'll take pictures after Mass. I'll walk around and take pictures of things that really moved me or spoke to me while I was in their sanctuary.
Yeah, that's something I like to do too. Maybe we'll have to get some of our pictures and put them together and post them for others to see.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes, and I was just going through pictures from my last vacation, and I had pictures from several different Catholic churches, and I don't know who all the statues were. So I took pictures of statues. I took pictures of relics, things that you see while you're there. I sometimes I wish other churches would do plaques, or, I know it's not a tourist attraction, but like, I wish they would tell you a little bit more, because if you're visiting, it's not always easy to know. I would like to know more about their sanctuary. And I have been to a few that they have pamphlets in the narthex or something that tell you their history, but it is fascinating. So I have so many pictures. I was just looking at them and I'm like, oh yeah, I wanted to like figure out who that was.
And that kind of brings up that each church has sometimes different devotions to different saints or different prayers that they might offer before or after Mass. But remember, we went to that National Shrine of St. Maximilian Kolbe in Illinois? And
Mhm.
that's an example. Like they had so much devoted to him as the national shrine. And we talked about going to San Antonio to the shrine, the Basilica, is it shrine, Basilica Shrine of the Little Flower? So St.
Mhm.
Therese. Well, I got to go over spring break and I did get to go to Mass. And that's the only time you can go in that church is for their daily Mass.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's completely locked. And it was beautiful, a very old church. It needs a little bit of love and attention, but it was really special to be able to go in there and see, like you said, the stained glass and their devotion to the Carmelites.
Mhm.
We'll have to go together sometime.
Yeah, I didn't know you went. You hadn't told me. So that was kind of cool.
Okay, so that brings us to another one, which is that you find different personalities of different parishes. We kind of touched on that, but each parish has, the way that they infuse their local culture into their parish.
Mhm. Something I've always loved about the Catholic Church is that, yes, universal, all people, but and the Mass is the same, roughly, but it reflects the personalities, the devotion, the community, the everywhere is just a little bit different, and I like that. I know some people don't; they think it all should be exactly the same, but I like that between the priest and the congregation and whether it's different cultures or ethnicities or communities. I like that when you go, like we went to that little church in Boston, and I think one of the readings was an Italian. It was an old Italian church. Like that was, I have no idea what they said, but it was super cool. And I loved that it was different than, the way it is down here where everyone is, lots of people in Houston are from everywhere else except for Houston these days. So it's just kind of fun to see the different personalities. Like I've been to a church all in Spanish here in Houston and a different part of Houston. And again, lots of little cultural touchstones that were, the music was very different. And I don't know, I like it. I like experiencing it.
That church in Boston, that was the first time I'd ever seen there was a high church and a low church. And I had no
Mm-hmm.
clue that churches there were built like that. I don't think I've seen one. Well, I know I've not seen one here in Houston, but there's that high church, which is like on the top floor and has the big arches and lots of the stained glass windows. And then they have what I would call the basement. And you come
Yes.
in and you go down the stairs, and it's like being in a basement room with windows somewhere. I don't remember if there were
Mm-hmm.
windows or not, but I'd never seen anything like that before. So when you
Mm-hmm.
said Boston, that was the first thing that came to mind was
Right.
high church, low church.
I'd only seen that in Europe, so that was a surprise to me too, to
So
see that in the
maybe it's
States.
like having a chapel versus a church, because
Probably.
I went to another one in the Dallas area, and this one was in Frisco, and they had something like 10 different masses in the same day. And some of them were in their chapel and some were in the church. And each one was different in terms of what music they offered, what language it was
Mm.
being offered in, whether it was geared toward the teens or more traditionalists and I was just blown away. I was like, how do we pick? And Brian was like, this is the one we have time to attend. And I'm like, well, then that's the one we're going to. But so sometimes
Yeah.
size matters, going to these big, I'll say mega church, but that's not really what I mean. You know, what, 6,000 families, maybe more, versus going to that tiny little rural church in Hearn, Texas, St. Mary's, of course, where everybody knows everybody. And they knew the minute we walked up, the two men at the door, they knew exactly that we were not a family they'd ever seen before. And I think we went there 4 times. So the 4th time we showed up, they gave us the nod, like, all right, you're acceptable now.
That's funny. Well, one of the things that I like to do if I'm invited to speak somewhere at a church is I like to go to mass there before I do the speaking engagement. And one of the reasons I like to do it is to get a feel for the parish, get a feel for the families, the priests, there's just something different. And I remember one here in Houston, and I was invited to speak to parents of their elementary faith formation group. And I went to the mass, and it was very interesting to me because all the people with families sat in the very back. And it was only older people who sat in the front. And so, it just, and the homily was very much geared towards an older generation. So my kids were with me, and the priest made some cultural references that I barely knew. It was kind of things like, I think of like my grandmother or even my mom, and it was like totally over most of the younger people's heads. So knowing that, that there was a cultural divide, let's say, between the generations in the parish and how they were welcomed and things like that, it really helped me understand the families, especially when they started asking me questions about my talk, that I was a little more prepared for it, because it was not like how it is at ours. Ours is lots of young families everywhere.
Yeah. And another thing that you discover about the personality of a parish is the music selections.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I mean, so different. So and I'm not going to, like, nothing is right or wrong. We're not going into that discussion, right?
No, we're not going to touch that.
But no, not with a 10-foot pole. But it's so different depending on, I don't know.
Location,
Whoever's picking
time,
it.
music, right, language.
Right.
We went to El Santuario de Chimeo in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and their music selections were all done with mariachi guitars. And it was
Oh,
lovely. And I loved it because it was different.
yeah.
It's not something you would ever hear in our parish, but it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, and then, I've been to some where the choir is amazing. And I've
Mm-hmm.
been to some where the choir is 3 locals up in the choir loft, and maybe their kids were up there too.
I mean,
And you're just
that's how our
kind of,
parish started.
yep, yep.
Yeah. And some where everybody sings, where it's one of those where it's a very community feel, very large choir, but it's just, I don't know, they choose songs that I guess everybody knows and everybody sings them. And then there's some that you go to where it's more like a performance, where it's beautiful choir. I mean, they all sound like professional singers with this harmony and instruments, and maybe the congregation's not singing because they're listening to the beautiful singing. And then there's others that even on a Sunday, it's acoustic. I mean, not acoustic, a cappella, where there's no instruments, and they're just, it's so fascinating. And that's one of the things I like to, just, you never know. I will say the biggest shock one I had, though, was we went to a Sunday afternoon. We had just arrived where we were in the state or the city we were in, and we picked. It was a neighborhood parish we picked because of the time and the location, and it was a suburban. I figured it was probably pretty similar. And man, oh man, was I surprised! It was like a rock band concert. I mean, full on electric guitars and drum kit, and I'm sure I had this look on my face. I'd never seen anything like that or heard anything like that in a Catholic church. So that was a first for me. And then a couple of days later, we went to this shrine and mass in the crypt, and it was a cappella. It was all in Latin, chant, so talk about two extremes within like 2 or 3 days of each other. And it was, I don't know, I journaled about it because it was just so, they're both Catholic, both, masses, the same graces and all of that. But wildly different personalities.
Yeah. And I think the exposure to that is one of the big benefits that you can get by visiting different parishes
Hmm.
and I'm not advocating not going every Sunday to your own home parish or being part of your community at a home parish, but when you find yourself out somewhere and needing to go to church and there's a parish nearby and you go there, it's really special sometimes.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so another point, another benefit that I've gotten out of going to different parishes is hearing a different approach in the message during the homily, getting to hear different priests other than our regular pastor
Hmm.
and parochial vicar.
Yes. I was going to say, I think one of my favorites ever was hearing about demonic possession
What?
and exorcisms in a homily, because that is not a usual topic. And so again, I was just like, wow, I've never heard a homily about demonic possession
Demonic
and
possessions?
exorcisms. Yes. It was so interesting. I
Oh.
was at the edge of my seat.
I like the way that no matter where you go, it's the same readings and they can be a different message, but you almost always, or at least I do, you almost always hear what God wants you to hear from it. And I think it's just one of those nice little benefits that God's still speaking to you, even though you're not quote
Hmm.
unquote at home in your neighborhood parish. You're somewhere else and you maybe you don't even know who's speaking. Like, I don't know if this is the pastor or one of their assigned priests,
Oh,
but
yes.
or even
Hmm.
a deacon. I mean, you know if it's a deacon, but if you don't know who the person is, sometimes I'll be
Hmm.
journaling and it's like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. And it's really speaking to me.
Hmm.
So,
You also hear a lot of the different styles. There's a lot of different styles that a priest or deacon can give a homily, whether they, walk through each of the readings, whether they tell stories. Some of them question and answer with the congregation. I mean, really engaged. Sometimes with the kids. I like it. Like I said, it all just kind of goes to one big Catholic universal church, but yet that whole we are one body but many parts.
mhm.
That's the way I think of it.
Right. Well, and the other thing I find is when I've been traveling or we've been with baseball and we've been at other parishes, when you come home, it kind of makes your home parish feel fresh and new. Then you kind of feel inspired to be at home and to participate. And in our case, sometimes we come back and we're like, ooh, I saw this really cool thing at another parish, and I would really like to have that here, or I'd really like to be part of that, bringing that here.
Much to the chagrin of every parish staff member ever.
Well, so for example, sometimes when you attend another parish, like I mentioned before, they greet you really well. And so I've never served as a greeter in our parish, but after going to some of these other churches, I came home and no, I haven't gone through any formal training or signed up officially as a greeter, but I've started standing in the front and greeting people as they come in rather than go in and take my seat and pray because I want them to feel as welcome coming in as I felt at maybe one of these other
Hmm.
parishes. And so that's kind of what I mean by it inspires you maybe to seek out a new ministry or a new service or join and participate because you had a positive experience at the other place. And it just
Hmm.
kind of awakens something in you to begin serving in your home.
I agree with that because you want to having that different experience makes you look at your parish sometimes with different eyes, maybe from the eyes of a visitor. And then, okay, how am I serving in a way to help others have that great experience? Another thing would be when I feel like the news sometimes in culture and all that kind of puts down faith, religion, how well there's a lot of Catholic infighting. So how well other Catholics are celebrating or living their faith or whatever. And so for me, when I go somewhere else and I just when I love it, when it's something just sparks, maybe it's different. Maybe, I've been reading about all these, Catholic culture wars on Twitter, which don't do it. Just, stay away from it. That if you find yourself caught up in it, and then you go to visit someplace that's different, maybe the people that, oh, they're bad or whatever. You go visit it and you're like, there's so much goodness maybe it's not the way I would choose to celebrate every week, but these people have hearts for Christ, and their priest is leading them to him through this mass, through, maybe it's like we said, different music, or they do a prayer. Some of the ones I visit, they do prayers at the end of mass, like at the very closing of mass. And then I just, we've not done it ours on Sundays. And I really like it. Kind of threw me for a loop the first time, because I'm ready to head out the pew, like the priest walks by, procession's over, and you're like, I'm ready to go. And then, but everyone is standing still, and you're like, are we, did I miss the memo? Is mass over? And then you realize the priest is still in the back of the church, and he's leading everyone in a prayer before they exit. And I really liked that. I was like, that's super cool.
Right. And that's not the kind of thing you're going to bring to your parish, but it might be the kind of thing you ask Father about, or have a conversation with him about, hey, I was at a parish and this happened, why do you do that or not do that here? Or at least it sparks conversation and y'all can have a discussion and relate to each other.
Well, I was going to say, or when things change, when things do start to change in your own parish, it gives you a broader sense of what else is going on out there. And maybe you're more willing to support it versus be critical of the changes. Because having worked in on parish staff, it is hard to make changes in a parish, because there's a lot of people who don't like changes.
You just reminded me, when we moved from our PLC worship space to our brand new, beautiful church worship space, I remember our pastor getting up there and saying, all right, we're in the new space. Welcome. I will not be receiving any comments or complaints for the next 4 months. You may begin talking to me about it on this date in April. And at that time, save it all. Go ahead and write your emails. Just don't click send until April 1st. And then we will address them all.
Yeah, actually, it was so funny, because he was right, though, because that big change of moving from our small temporary space into the big worship space, there were a lot of hiccups. There were a lot of things that had to be worked out, and things that were uncomfortable in the beginning. And by the end of that 4 months, I think most people were pretty settled. And I think, most of the ministers and everything else had gotten their kinks worked out. So he was pretty smart.
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant. All right, Lisa, I did come up with a beautiful piece of scripture that I thought fit this episode nicely.
Okay.
And it is, for through him we both have access in one spirit to the Father. So then, you are no longer strangers and sojourners, but you are fellow citizens with the holy ones and members of the household of God. And that's from Ephesians chapter 2, verse 18 through 19. But I thought that one fit really well with this episode, because we are all fellow citizens and members of the household of God. And the whole reason for this episode was to encourage everyone to go out and experience the broadness and varied personalities of our internationally universal Catholic faith by maybe visiting a different parish once in a while to see what else is going on, and get some of these benefits and bring them back to your own parish and your own heart.
You know what we should do, Shelley? We should go back and visit the parish that we grew up in.
Well, I hate to tell you this, the building itself is no longer there. It's gone, and they've rebuilt a huge church there.
Yeah.
But I agree, it would be nice to see it.
To go back over there and celebrate Mass. I think that would be kind of fun. Little homecoming.
I think it would be fun. I agree. And I also think it would be fun to maybe go back and see the church where we were baptized. We'll have to call Mom and find out where that was.
Yeah, I do.
But it's in Houston. It's in Houston somewhere.
That was good. I was like, uh-oh, I don't remember the name of that.
I always mess it up, so I'm not going to say it, because if I say it, it'll be the wrong one.
Well, when I was visiting in Tulsa recently, I did go back and go to the parish there that I went to when I was in high school. So,
do you remember the name of it?
Yeah, St. Bernard of Clairvaux. Yep.
Okay.
In South Tulsa.
Yeah, I was getting it mixed up, I think, with St. Francis, but that's the hospital, right?
St.
that was on the
Francis the
corner?
Hospital in Tulsa. Yes,
Okay.
Catholic hospital. That I
All
was a
right.
candy striper at. Okay, Shell, we have a piece of we got a review on Apple Podcasts that we have not read yet, and I want to give this person a shout out. I want to say thank you for their review and rating because that helps other people really find the podcast, and also we appreciate the kudos because we spend a lot of time working on this, and it's nice to know that you're out there and you appreciate it. So this is from Tracy B. And it says, I love the authentic feel to the conversations on this podcast and appreciate how these sisters are so down to earth and supportive with their listeners while sharing their faith journeys. So thank you, Tracy B. I really, really, really appreciate that. We invite you, dear listeners, if you like our podcast, to leave us a rating and possibly a review. A couple sentences is fine on wherever you are listening, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts.
All right, Lisa. Well, to everyone out there, thank you so much for your support and thank you for listening. And we hope you have a wonderful week.
We will see you next Thursday. Bye.